Hi everyone. Okay, so I realized after I made my giant list that I've actually already made a video similar to this regarding cat food. And although my other video was specifically about what is in your cat food and how to pick a good quality cat food, I found that there was a huge thing lacking, and that's just general information about cat foods, as I said, in general. So I'm going to go over some things that I think a lot of people don't realize when they are looking for cat food, and a lot of misconceptions about the cat food that they are either looking at or have their cats on. So I'm just going to try to go over some of those bigger things that I didn't include in the other video. So the first thing I'm gonna go over is the topic of wet food versus dry food. Now, I work in a pet store as a groomer, and I get an atrocious amount of people who come in and will say one thing or another about why they don't feed their cats wet food. Usually it's wet food gives your cats worms, or it's really bad for their teeth. Now, these are just, these reasons just don't have a leg to stand on. What you feed your cat, as long as you're not feeding your cat a wild, chipmunk, it's not going to give your cat worms. If you look on the ingredient list, worms is not in the ingredients. It's really the same thing as dry food. It's just got more water in it. And the other thing is the whole issue about, oh, it's not good for your cat's teeth. Very small note: if the people in the pet industry had developed a product that cleaned a pet's teeth sufficiently enough that you wouldn't have to brush them every day, nobody would brush their teeth. You'd have this bag of chips sitting on your counter that says, eat a bag of chips every day and your teeth will be pearly white. Feeding your cat wet or dry food is not going to make an enormous amount of difference. If anything, feeding your cat wet food is better for their teeth because pieces don't get stuck in their teeth. If you want your cat to have nice teeth, brush them. Or have a regular dentistry done to keep your cat's teeth in good repair. So I'm going to try to go over some benefits and like the pros and cons of wet, and then the pros and cons of dry. So if you see me looking this way, there's a list because I'm pretty forgetful. So the biggest reason why I suggest to people to feed their cat a wet food is the water content. Because cats are obligate carnivores, they obviously would prefer to go out and eat a wild squirrel than munch on a piece of leaf. So, because if you think about it, most of the wild things that cats would eat, so birds, squirrels, chipmunks, stuff like that, they're 75% water. So they don't need to go and find a creek and drink out of it because they're getting the water content from the food that they're eating. So it's actually better for your cat to be eating wet food because it gives them the water that they need, and it's not just the water that they're bringing in. Like, it goes way beyond that. Cats, especially males. Hi, Maggers. I've got a cat. Oh, where'd she go? There she is. One of my kittens. Actually, at the time I made the other video, Cornelia, I had just gotten Cornelia, and she was still pregnant at the time. This is one of her kittens. She's 13 weeks old as of yesterday. This is Maggie. She was the smallest cat, and we were really concerned that she might have a health issue, so we decided to keep her. You wouldn't believe that she's 13 weeks old, but she is. She's pretty little. Much bigger than when we kept her. Okay, go terrorize the dogs. So cats, and particularly male cats, they are prone to getting what is called a UTI, a urinary tract infection, a blockage, and issues with their urinary tract in a whole. So the bladder, the ureters, the kidneys, and the urethra. The problem is that it derives from the fact that a lot of cats are fed a dry diet, which means that they don't have the moisture, which leads to the problems. And an excellent website to check out, and I actually saw this from a different video, it's called catinfo.org. They go into specifics about this and how, my cat was fine You know, my cat is doing fine on dry food, wet food, or dry food, and my cat's doing fine being overweight until there's a problem. So that is why I prefer the wet food. Now, the issue that a lot of people have with wet food, there's usually really two issues. A, it's very expensive in comparison to dry food, because of the processing, the cans, the markup. You know, people will pay more for better food. It's actually not as cheap as dry food. Now, I do have a trick for getting around that, but that is usually the reason why people don't. They usually splurge and get a can of cat food. And like I said in my other video, it's best to go for the grain-free stuff. Whiskas, you might as well just feed them rocks for all that's going to do for them. You might as well open up a can of tuna and feed them tuna water. If you're trying to get them to drink, then give them a can of Whiskas, because there's so much crap in there you would not believe. The other thing that people have an issue with is the convenience. It's a heck of a lot easier to pour out a thing of food from a bag and just leave it there for a couple days until it's gone. You can't really do that with cat food. It has to be refrigerated. You have to, you know, you can't just, well, I know a lot of people who just take it out of the can, but I'm one of those people that has to mush it up. So it is quite time consuming. If you recycle, you have to wash the cans and put them in the recycling bin and blah, blah, blah. So it is a convenience factor, but honestly, truly, it is very good for your cat, and it's something that you might want to give it a whirl, for lack of a better term, or, you know, really strive to get to. Meggers, she finished all of her cat food, so she's going to eat Bridges. Yeah, Bridges, cat food. I just gave my cats their daily wet food, so they're chowing down. Maggie's still a kitten, of course, so she's going to eat like crazy. Now, the whole issue about dry food. Now, dry food is very good as a staple for your cats. And myself, personally, we've never had a problem feeding dry food. But we have a cat water fountain, and we do feed our cats wet food on a regular basis. There is no bad thing about feeding your cats dry food. Aside from the water content. That's my biggest pet peeve about dry food. So cats who are overweight, one of the biggest things I think people overlook is that their cats are usually overweight because they're eating so much to try to get the water content out of their food. It's a natural instinct for them to eat wild foods, so the water would normally be there. So when your cat's hungry, instead of it going, I should go over to the dish and grab a drink of water, it goes, I should go and eat something because I'm thirsty. I know it's kind of a twisted way of thinking, but essentially that's what we're coming down to as far as cats go. So obesity can often be linked to that. If you give your cat a can of wet food and put a little bit extra water in it, I always put a little extra water in my wet cat food, you can actually reduce the amount of that your cat feels it needs to drink because there's wet food in there. Or there's water, rather. Another thing about dry food is the convenience factor, scoop it out of the bag, throw it in the dish, and the price. Dry cat food is a fair bit cheaper than wet cat food, but like I said, there is a very big way to get around this. Wet cat food and dry cat food from the same companies are essentially the same thing. The only difference is that what they do with the dry cat food is they turn it into a powder almost. They process it, like they'll send it through a blender almost, and then they'll just add the water to it. So if you look at a can of cat food, usually the first ingredient it says is sufficient water for processing. So if you look at the guaranteed analysis, it might say that 70% of the can is moisture. So if you take down, 70% of that can, that last 30% is really just dry food. So essentially what you could do is take your dry food, throw it in a blender, put about 30% food, 70% water, and throw it through the blender, blend the crap out of it, and most cats will eat it. Now, in the topic of cats who don't like wet food, what you can do is actually use that system to switch your cats over to encourage them to eat more of the wet food. Start with just a little bit of water, and then add a little bit more every time, and then start mashing it, and then start blending it, and they might eventually understand that the texture, it's usually a texture issue that the cats have. A lot of cats If they don't like wet food, you'll see that they'll lick all the water off. That's usually the issue, is that they don't like the texture. So keep that in mind. Now, another thing about feeding your cat is this whole grain versus grain-free issue. Now, I addressed that heavily on the last issue, so I'll just breeze over this part. Cats are obligate carnivores, which means that they will always go for a rabbit or a squirrel or a chipmunk before they will go for blueberries off a bush. So that being said, packing a whole bunch of corn and wheat and grains into your cat's food just doesn't make sense. That would be the equivalent of sticking bugs in your food. You don't eat bugs. Why would you put bugs in your food if you don't eat bugs? Sure, they're cheap and you can find them everywhere, but nutritionally speaking, you don't eat bugs. So why are you feeding bugs, right? So I always tell people who come into the store who are looking to switch their cats to food, to dry food, or to a different food, or higher quality food, that at the pet store I work at, we actually only sell what we believe in. That's our motto. So we strive ourselves in looking into the highest quality stuff we can find, without charging people an arm and a leg. So we only sell grain-free foods, and the grained foods that we do feed have higher quality grains in them. So we're not talking packed with corn, we're talking a little bit of oats on the side. So I always suggest for people to feed grain-free foods. Another issue I don't think I mentioned in the last video is that plant matter does actually have protein in it. The problem is that people have been they take that to their advantage as far as companies go that make wet cat food, because they put protein from plants instead of protein from animals because it's cheaper. So that's why I always suggest a grain-free food for cats. Portion control. This is a huge thing that I explain to people, is that cats will overeat. Actually, most of them will, not all of them. Wet cat food is a great way because you have to take it out of the can, so you might as well measure it out instead of just scooping it out of the bag and pouring it in or putting it in one of those gravity feeders. Portion control is huge for me. Overweight cats have a lot of health issues with their joints, with fatty liver disease, and other things like that. A lot of cats that are overweight can't clean themselves properly. They get very sick very easily because they don't have a good the whole system is just not nice. I actually did an autopsy, a necropsy on a cat once whose heart was so covered in fat that I had to actually dig it out. It was absolutely disgusting. The last thing I'm going to address, and of course Maggie, you can't see her, but she sees the pen on she's right there. Another thing that a lot of people tend to look for when they find a cat food is that hairball control in their cat food. Now, to me, this is a band-aid. Adding something to your cat's diet because it's prone to hairballs is just trying to band-aid the effect of the cause instead of fixing the cause in the first place. If your cat is suffering from hairballs, then it's because it's licking too much loose hair off of their body, or it could not be hairballs at all. It could be a digestive upset that's just making the cat throw up, and you assume that it's a hairball. So when you go out and find hairball remedies, it's a whole bunch of crap. It's crap. If your cat is suffering from hairballs and your cat needs to be groomed more often, in extreme cases, I suggest to people to have their cats shaved. Now, some cats don't care to be shaved at all. Other cats can just do with a bath, which will get rid of most of the loose hair. You kind of got to play it by your cat. Maggie, I can't see a thing. She's purring. You kind of got to play it by cat. Shaving your cat will reduce the amount of hair on your cat to begin with, so chances are it's not going to get as many hairballs. But I really do suggest you talk to your vet about what might be happening instead of, band-aiding it. Oh, we'll just give the cat some Vitalax and it'll go away. Well, the problem is that you're not fixing the problem. You're just band-aiding the problem. So keep these things in mind when you're feeding your cat. If you have any questions about cat foods, please drop me a line. And Maggie says hello. And I hope you learned something. Oop.